Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera, where I'm coming to you today from the comfort of my living room. Today is July 23rd. That's right, the opening day to the Olympics here. Being it's July 23rd, it's incredibly hot and humid outside today. We have the full heat and humidity of the summer season upon us. And in addition to that, semi-sans, or cicadas, are also out in full strength and singing at full volume. So rather than go out and sweat like crazy and try to make myself heard over the background noise, I decided to go ahead and shoot a video from indoors. My wife and daughter are out and about today, being that the opening ceremony for the Olympics is being held. We're expecting a flyover from, the Blue Angels or something like that. That's what my wife said. It's hard to imagine the Blue Angels in Japan, as I think Japan has its own flight team, but I'm not really sure. She would probably know better than me about this, but you may hear them in the background as I'm trying to make the video here. The subject of today's video is going to be another Nikon rangefinder camera. My videos about the S3 and SP went over rather well, so I thought I'd go ahead and make one about what was Nikon's most popular rangefinder camera, and that was the Nikon S2. For those of you who are new to my channel, I sell vintage Japanese cameras in my online store, japanvintagecamera.com, and my Etsy store, which is also called Japan Vintage Camera. So if you're interested in buying this Nikon or another vintage Japanese camera, please visit my stores. I'll post links to my stores in the description below the video. So the S2 was introduced in 1955 and was produced until 1957 when it was replaced by the SP. As I said, this was Nikon's most popular rangefinder camera. By 1955, Japan's economy was getting under full steam, and people could afford better things than they had in the previous years. And Nikon was marketing these cameras rather heavily to press photographers. In the mid-1950s, press photographers were getting rid of their 4x5 and medium format cameras and switching to the much more convenient 35mm format. And quite a few of these were sold. There were 3 different variations of the S2. The original version was an all-chrome camera. That was replaced by the black dial version, and I'm holding an example of the black dial version here. Rather obvious because it has black dials. And a black paint version, which was sold in very limited numbers to press photographers. You could only buy or order one of these black paint cameras if you were a press photographer. And I'm not sure what press photographers make nowadays. In those days, they didn't make a hell of a lot of money, so needless to say, not a lot of them were sold. And today, they get a really high price with collectors. I don't normally sell these cameras because they are so expensive. A well-used camera in functional shape is between $8,000 and $10,000. If you're looking for a pristine example with original box and such, you're looking between $20,000 and $25,000. I don't normally sell these cameras, as I said, but if anyone is interested in one of these more high-end versions, please contact me. I can get one for you. Let's go ahead and take a look at the features, controls, and functions of the Nikon S2. Starting from the top, you'll notice a little bit of similarity between this camera and the Nikon F. Just 2 or 3 things. First is it shares the same film rewind dial as the F. It has the same shutter button as the F and a very similar design for the film winding and shutter charging lever, but otherwise it's different. Of course, as I said, we have the shutter rewind knob here with the lever which pops out. And underneath we have this big black dial here with a series of numbers starting with X. And this is for setting up the flash synchro. And flash was getting quite popular in those days, especially with the press photographers, which was one reason why this camera sold well to press photographers. When using flash bulbs, you could adjust the camera to use higher shutter speeds with a bulb flash. And quite a convenient system and very new at the time. It wasn't available on the earlier cameras, and I haven't seen this feature on Canon's rangefinder cameras of the time. But once again, it only works with the old bulb flashes. These bulbs tend to burn for a long time, long enough for you to be able to take an exposure at 1/1000th of a second, something which you can't really do with a strobe flash. If you're going to use a flash on this camera and you're using a strobe flash, just set this dial to X and set your shutter speed dial to X, and then follow the directions on your flash and you're good to go. Next to that, we have a shoe for mounting your flash gun, and in front we have this kind of round thing with a white insulator, and this is for mounting Nikon's factory flash gun. And this is kind of an early version of a hot shoe flash with an electrical contact in the center, which allowed you to use the flash without running an accessory wire to the PC sync socket on the front. If you're running a more modern flash with a camera, just plug it into here. Next to this, we have the shutter speed dial, and this is a two-piece dial with two ranges. The top dial is what you use to set the faster speeds, from 1/30th of a second up to 1/1000th of a second. And the dial below allows you to shoot from 1/15th of a second down to 1 second, as well as a B and T setting. The B setting is actually on the top dial, and the T setting is on the bottom dial. The T setting is a setting where when you touch the shutter button, the shutter will just lock open, and it will remain there until you either turn the shutter speed dial or cock the shutter once again. And this is good for really, really long exposures, or for doing things like doing adjustments on the camera, or doing things like shooting, say, trying to, I guess, being creative. I once tried to adapt Polaroid backs to certain cameras just to see how they would work, and T setting allows you to do things like put a focusing screen on the back and such like that. So kind of gimmicky, not really necessary nowadays, but it was kind of seen as a necessary feature in the old days, and a lot of the earlier cameras have them. Next to that, we have the shutter release button, and around the shutter release button we have this switch, which switches between the A and R settings. The A is the setting you use when you're operating the camera, and the R setting is what you use when you want to rewind the film. Next to that, we have the film winding and shutter charging lever, and on top of this we have the film counter dial. This counter dial doesn't reset automatically like it does on the S3 or SP. To reset it, once you load the film and have it pulled over and wound a couple of strokes, you set the counter to 0, and as you take photos, you will see the dial in the center turn. Make sure that you don't touch or move the dial when you have film in the camera, because you don't want to lose count of how many frames you have left. On the back of the camera we have the viewfinder eyepiece, and this camera has bright light frame lines built in. It doesn't have parallax correction, but there are parallax indicators on the frame lines, which allow you to see where to focus at infinity and close focus. It's a very simple and effective system. The viewfinder window is enough for most people to be able to use it with eyeglasses, though it is metal, so be careful not to scratch your glasses if you are using it with glasses. It is possible to put a diopter on one of these cameras. I tend to use like diopters designed for other maker cameras, and I can kind of cut them or grind them or modify them to fit, and just stick them on with silicone or rubber glue. And when you want to, for one thing, if you put them, it protects your glasses, because most of these are made out of plastic, and you can remove them without causing any damage to the camera. Moving to the front of the camera, we have the viewfinder window here, and it's quite large. This was a huge improvement over the earlier Nikon S camera, which had a very tiny window. The original S was like the earlier Leica rangefinder cameras, where it didn't have any frame lines which you used to focus. You simply looked through the viewfinder, and whatever you saw through the viewfinder was pretty much what you captured on film. Some people really like this system and are not fans of the projected frame lines. For myself, I like the frame lines because it allows you to see things outside of what you're taking a photo of. And with this system, sometimes you see things that are worth adding to your photo. So you might want to move the camera a little bit to get something else in the frame with your subject. You can also see when people are beginning to move into your field of view. But Some people don't like this kind of system. They like the earlier style, or they like to use an accessory finder. And an example of one of these photographers is James Revelius, who was one of my favorite photographers. He shot mainly with a Leica M3, which is quite famous for its a viewfinder system and the frame lines, but he didn't like this kind of system. He never used that viewfinder. He used an accessory viewfinder for the top, the Leica one, which you adjust, and it gives you a very crisp outline, but only shows precisely what is going to be on the film. And this finder is kind of adjustable for parallax up and down, and it's centered more over the center of the lens, so it might be a more accurate system than the viewfinders, where the viewfinder is off to the side, and especially at close focus, this can kind of make a difference. But anyway, I see this as an improvement to the camera rather than something unnecessary. On the right side here, we have the focusing dial. We have the release lever for the infinity lock. All you have to do is just, when the lens is focused to infinity, it will lock there. Just touch down a little bit and turn the dial, and you can focus the lens. You can focus the lens either using the focusing dial on the top or by turning the lens itself. Keep in mind that when you are focusing the lens, to use the focusing barrel and not the aperture ring, and mistakenly change your aperture without intending to. Like the Nikon S3 and SP, we have a kind of double mount system for lenses here. The 50 millimeter lenses used the center mount here and focused inside the lens helicoid. So when you focus the camera, the entire lens helicoid and lens itself moves. On the wider angle lenses and a couple of versions, or the later version of the 50mm f1.1 lens, you mount the lens to this external bayonet. A little bit like, kind of like the ones you see on the Canon 7 rangefinder camera, except for on the Nikon S mount, most of the lenses used the external mount, whereas on the Canon camera, only the 50 f/0.95 lens used that mount. There's an infinity lock also located here, and when you mount one of the other lenses, the wide angle lens, say 35, 28, 25, or the telephoto lenses, they unlock the focus helicoid and they replace it with their own lock. They have their own infinity lock, which is usually a button located somewhere around the lens. Normally I have one of these lenses on hand, but I don't now, as I happen to sell all the examples I had. On the focusing helicoid here, we have the focusing scale, and as this is an earlier S2 camera, it's arranged in feet rather than meters like the later cameras. And on the top here of the outer bayonet, we have the depth of field scale, which allows you to see how much depth of field you have at any given aperture, at least for the 50mm lenses. Mounting the lens is simple. On the lens on the back, there's a tab here by where my finger is. Since I'm using a GX7 Mark whatever it is camera, it has pretty horrible autofocus, so I apologize if this isn't focusing very well. But this tab you line up with the red mark here, and then turn it counterclockwise, and it locks in place, and the camera is ready to go. On the bottom of the camera, it's pretty much the same as the S3 and SP. We have a tripod socket in the middle, which accepts a standard 1/4-inch tripod hardware. We have a reminder dial here to program what speed or what type of film you're using. And over here we have the latch, which we use to remove the film back and load the film. One good thing about the Nikon S2 over the original Nikon S cameras is they used an improved shutter material or shutter cloth. One problem I have with the earlier S cameras, though I really like them, is that the shutter cloth material, the rubberized silk, was not very durable and very prone to dry rotting or stiffening, which makes the shutter inaccurate or stick or causes the shutter curtain ribbons to break. The S2 has much improved shutter curtains and much more reliable. It's not very often that I find one of these cameras that the shutter curtains are bad in, so keep that in mind when you're looking at the old cameras. The S2 is better than the old S in this regard. Loading the film is very simple. You simply set the film canister in the slot here, pull your film over the top, feed it into the take-up spool, turn the spool until the film is pulled across and the holes on the top and the bottom of the film are being caught by the teeth on the take-up spool. When you place the film back on these cameras, any removable film back camera, always place it really close to the top. That way when you push it into place, you don't pinch or distort the film and cause all kinds of problems. And then simply wind the shutter a couple of times. And then reset your film counter like so, and you're good to go. Anyway, that's it for my review of the Nikon S2 film camera. I will be listing this one later today in my online store, so if you're interested, please keep an eye open for it. I listed the SP, which I did a video about last week, or I guess it was last week I did the SP video, so if you're interested in that one, a lot of people asked if I still have it available. Yes, I do. It's listed in my Etsy store right now. I plan to be listing a few more cameras over the next few days, and some more Nikon rangefinder cameras next month. So if this one sells or disappears before you get a chance to bid on it, please check back next month. I plan to have some more. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.